When people are injured at work, it is important to know your rights and what types of things need to happen as a result, and to protect those rights going forward. The area of workers' compensation is very different from what people generally think of with the court systems as they relate to injuries. Most people think of injuries as they relate to automobile accidents or falls and other types of things that they can blame on the fault of another person. Workers' compensation is blind to the fact of who is at fault or whether anybody was negligent or not. The mere fact that you are working for a company and are injured while doing work for that company entitles you to certain benefits. And it's important to understand how to preserve the rights to those benefits, because these are many steps that you need to take as a victim, as opposed to hoping or banking on the fact that your employer will do it for you. Clearly, the first thing that needs to be done immediately is to report the injury. Too many people hurt their claims by assuming that they'll get better and not reporting the fact that they have fallen or been injured or had any type of an injury at work until sometimes days, weeks, or even months later. And by the time they report that injury, the employer is able to cast doubt on whether that injury actually occurred during the course of work. So it's important to immediately notify your employer or your supervisor, and in writing if possible, of the fact that an injury has occurred and that the work accident has occurred. Moreover, if you have suffered an injury, it's very important to immediately seek care for that injury. Once again, many people that assume that the pain or the injury will go away leave the claim undocumented. And when they finally claim an injury, it's so far removed from the actual fact that it's very difficult for anybody to prove that the actual work accident caused the injury that they're complaining of. It's also important, once you obtain that medical treatment, to notify your physicians, whichever ones you see, of the entire scope of your injuries. One of the problems that people have is that when they see a physician, they tell them what the biggest problem that they have is. Well, as everybody knows, some days some things hurt, some days other things hurt. And while one thing might get better by treatment from a physician, something else may linger. And if you haven't informed your physician of the entire problems that you're having, many times it can be very difficult to come back after the fact, weeks or even months later, and say, well, I haven't really talked about this type of an injury, but this came from the accident as well. So it's very important to explain to your physician every problem, whether you think it's a small one or a large one. Finally, it's also very important to begin the claim, to file the claim. One of the things that employers sometimes do is they begin to pay the medical bills, and they begin to pay people for their lost time, but they never formally file a claim. And in many jurisdictions, if you fail to file that claim, even if you thought that your employer was willing to pay, once a certain time limit has passed, you can be barred from completing that claim, from going any farther with that claim. And workers' compensation is intended to provide, in some cases, lifetime benefits. So it is imperative that you file a formal claim with the Workers' Compensation Commission. Finally, as you can see, there are a lot of complicated issues that go along with workers' compensation. It is important to have somebody, and helpful to have somebody, that can guide you through some of the pitfalls that people run into as they proceed forward in workers' compensation. It's important that you hire and retain counsel that is well schooled and versed and has the ability to maximize not only the protection and the treatment, but the recovery that you're ultimately able to obtain as a result of the injury from work.